Today I'm going to show you how to replace your broken 9-volt battery connector that you might have. As you can see on my connector, one of the wires is broken off of the connector. These wires are pretty tiny and it doesn't take much force or pressure or corrosion, to cause them to break. So instead of throwing away the device that it's powering, you can replace it and maybe save yourself some money. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. So I did go ahead and order a replacement 9-volt battery connector. They're easy to find. They're only a few bucks on Amazon. I'll put the link to the one I got down in the description of this video. And then going forward, the best way to do this, or an electronics specialist would say, well, you should take a soldering iron and remove the connectors where they go into the board here. Put your new wires in there and solder them back in. But, well, I don't have a soldering iron, and chances are most people don't that are watching this. So I'm just going to, cut my wires where they're broken and strip them off and just wire them together. So the things I'm going to need are just a generic pair of wire strippers that you might have laying around, or they're available anywhere, basically Walmart or auto parts or farm supply stores. You probably need a pair of needle nose pliers, and you'll need something to protect the wire splice. Pretty much heat shrink is what is ideal to use, and I've just got a pack that has various sizes, but really the size I need is the smallest, tiniest size. It's a 1/16 inch size. Here's the sizes that came in this pack of heat shrink. So 1/16 is the small size, and there is a 1/8 size that could work as well. But as you can see, the 1/16 is really tiny, and it fits on to the wire well. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to do that, and maybe save yourself a few bucks. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is trim off the old connector. So the wire that's already broken, it's pretty corroded on the very end of it. So I'm just going to snip off that kind of crusty end. Don't cut off it very much. Leave as much as you can on there because the wire's already short enough. Okay. Now, the one good wire that's on there, same thing. Just cut it off as close as you can to the connector. Okay. One thing to note, these 9-volt battery connectors can be different. My original one, the wires were coming out right in the middle of the two terminals here. My replacement one, the wires come out the end. You would think that wouldn't matter, but what that does is it makes it harder to fit this in there when the battery's in there. When the wires are coming out the end like that, see, it's more challenging to fit the battery in. If the wires were coming out the middle, the battery would fit in. So if you have a small or tiny battery compartment and you think that might matter to you, order the right connector with the wires coming out there. But in most cases, that's not going to matter. It's not going to matter for me. I'm going to go ahead and use this connector. I can manage to fit that 9-volt battery in here, with this. Now that you have your battery connector cut off, the next step is to prepare your new connector to be installed, to be put together here. So look at your battery compartment and your new connector, figure out which direction you're going to mount your battery in here, or which side of the compartment, because that'll matter on how much wire you leave on the new connector. The new connector is going to be way too long on the wires, so just decide where to trim it. Now don't trim it too short. It's better to have it a little bit too long than a little bit too short, obviously. And don't forget that you're going to have to strip off a little bit of the wire insulation. So for me, something like this should work. I'm gonna go ahead and trim these off. Okay, the next step is to actually strip off the insulation on the wire so you can make a connection or wire the actual wire together. Now, if you have cut off a piece of your new connector, you can practice on this little one just to make sure you're doing it right so that you don't, mess up your actual connector. So that's what I'm going to do. I've just taken a piece of wire that I know I'm not going to use, but I'm just going to practice. Your wire strippers should have a bunch of different wire sizes. This wire is tiny, so it's the smallest on my strippers anyway, it's the smallest available slot for the small wire. They're 20 to 22 size wire. Wires are kind of a bit strange in that the smaller the wire, the bigger the actual number. So the larger the size, the number size of the wire, actually the smaller the wire. So these are gauges: 10 gauge, 12 gauge, 14 gauge. Down at the bottom, 20 to 22 gauge wire is what we need. So put your wire in there, stick it out a quarter of an inch, and squeeze on the handles and just rotate it around. You're cutting that insulation, and then once you've rotated it plenty of times, just pull it out, and there you go. The insulation cuts off and your wire remains. That's it. Now I'm going to do the real deal here on my real connector. I'm going to do the same thing. Stick it out about a quarter of an inch, just enough to where I'm going to have enough actual wire to wire it together with my other side. And there you go on that one. Now I'll do the black one. Okay, now I've got my wires sticking out. Now, as you'll notice, wires, pretty much any electrical wires, are made up of a bundle of lots of little wires. So it looks like frayed ends, kind of. So before you can make a good connection, take the end of the wire and twist it in a clockwise direction, a right direction, a bunch of times, and that will twist all these little strands together so they form more of a stronger kind of cable, almost like just adds a little strength to the wires. You do that until it's nice and strong looking. Do it on both sides. That way you don't have any tiny little frayed wires. Now strip the wires on my device side. Now this is a little hard to reach, so I'm going to have to probably hold the wire with a pair of pliers or something just to pull it out enough. Now don't pull too hard. Don't want to pull it out of the mounting place there, but same thing. You just try the best you can to get your wire cutters on there. Strip it off about the same amount. And just be careful not to pull it out of, like, pull the whole wire off. There you go. And that seemed to work good. I'm going to do the same with the red wire. It worked. I don't have as much as I'd like sticking out there, but it should be plenty. It's not quite like a quarter inch, but it should be good enough for what we need and for the tiny amount of current these little wires carry. Now, same kind of thing, if you can, the same deal you did on the connector side. Twist together here, all the little tiny wires clockwise, so they kind of get some strength in them. Now, before you just splice them together, if you're going to use, you got to think about how you're going to protect these bare wires after you connect them together here. So I'm going to use heat shrink. Like I said, heat shrink is just a tiny little tube. There's different sizes of it for different size wires, but like I said before, 1/16 size is the smallest one I could find, and what looks like will work for this. So how it works is, like, I'll use this piece of wire to demonstrate. You take a piece of heat shrink and you cut it off to a length that's would be about right to to protect the connector. So imagine there's another wire coming from here to connect to this one. Before you make the connection, slip that piece of heat shrink over the wire bundle, or the wire. Push it on there, push all the way through. Now you take your other wire and make a connection, and then slip it back over the bare wire there. Then this is called heat shrink for a reason, because it shrinks under heat. So you take a hair dryer, you could use a lighter, but this is so tiny, really just use a hair dryer. A lighter would be too much heat and probably melt it too fast. So you stick a hair dryer on here, and this shrinks this tube down and really protects that connection. And then you're done. So we're going to do that on here. You can just use black tape, but that would be a challenge. So I'm going to doubly protect mine. I'm going to put a little piece of larger 1/8 inch heat shrink on both wires together first. So that way when I'm done, I can kind of protect both of them. Okay, so that's on there. Now we're down to individual wires here. Here's my little tiny heat shrink, 1/16. Slip that on. Okay. Now I can go ahead and, well, I guess I might as well put the heat shrink on the red one as well. Now you just really wire them together. Make sure you wire it as tight as you can together. Remember, this wire is tiny, so it's not going to have much strength on its own. That's why it really is ideal to use a soldering iron, but you know what, we're going to get by without that. Okay, so you might have to use some pliers or a helper to hold the wire to where you can reach it. Now remember, put red to red, of course, and black to black, and don't cross them up. So you just kind of make an X, just lay the wires across each other like an X, and just twist them together to the right. That's the kind of standard way. Just make sure they maintain a good connection. And you want as much of that bare wire touching as possible. I'm going to kind of hold my rubber part of the wires with the pliers and do some twisting by hand here. So that seems to be pretty well connected. Now, think about which direction you're going to slide that heat shrink. We're going to slide it from up here, obviously from the top. So I'm going to push my twisted up wires down. That way it's easier for me to slide that heat shrink down. And I'm going to go ahead and slide that heat shrink on that black wire down over that to protect that. The heat shrink is really small, so be patient. And there it goes. Looks like I'm pretty good to go there on the black wire. Now be careful, don't pull on this too much, because it's barely, there's not a lot of strength in this tiny wire, especially before I get both sides connected. If you've messed up your other wire, go ahead and retwist that. Once you have both wires held with your pliers, you should be able to wire them together. If you can't reach it with your fingers, you can take a second pair of needle nose and do the twisting. Just be careful not to twist too much, because with the pliers, it's, you know, these wires are tiny and you could break them. All right, my connection seems decent. Okay, I'm gonna push down that connection, try to make it as flat as I can so that that heat shrink slide over it. And then I'm just gonna try to move that heat shrink over that bare wire. Don't push too hard, you'll push it kind of together, or push it off. I mean, you don't want to push it off. There we go. Something like that. Layer of something holding these wires where that connection is, add some strength to it. There it goes. Now, just take a hair dryer and I'm gonna blast this heat shrink with a hair dryer, and it should shrink right up. Looks to me like that heat shrink did its job and kind of shrink up. There, see on the ins outs shrink. That's going to help hold that wire connection together for me, and I think that that's done. Okay, so I hooked my 9-volt battery up to the new connector, and if you can see, the lights on my keypad are now coming on. So that seemed to work for me. So I was able to prevent the need to replace this entire keypad and just spend a few bucks on a wire connector. So hopefully you guys can do the same with whatever it is that you're trying to repair, and I hope this video helped you out, and if it did, hit the like button for me. Thank you.